Mistress lied about her pregnancy to trap a millionaire. His real wife exposed the ultimate truth. Secrets, lies, and hidden desires. This is the story of how one man's world was turned upside down by a cunning mistress who claimed she was pregnant to seal her luxurious future. When Frederick Miller, a charismatic millionaire, found himself caught between the woman he vowed to love forever and a newcomer burning with ambition, everything he believed about loyalty and truth shattered. His unsuspecting wife, Vanessa, was determined to uncover the facts, refusing to be cast aside. A tangled web of betrayal, manipulation, and buried regrets began to unravel. Little did they know, the ultimate betrayal carried devastating consequences no one could have foreseen. Frederick Miller was not born into wealth. He built his empire brick by brick, deal by deal, forging an unstoppable reputation in the world of real estate investment. At 42, he carried himself with the confidence only self-made men possess, the sort of poised assurance that turned heads whenever he entered a room. For most of his adult life, he had been married to Vanessa Miller, a woman whose grace matched his ambition, whose love had propelled him through countless storms. The Millers lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park in New York City. It wasn't just any penthouse, it was a masterpiece of architecture, an emblem of Frederick's success. When guests stepped into that lavish space on the 67th floor of an upscale building, they gazed in awe at the panoramic views of the city that never slept. The living room boasted floor-to-ceiling windows, and by day, it allowed the sunlight to wash across every inch of handcrafted teak floors. By night, it presented the dazzling skyline that had lured so many dreamers to Manhattan. Vanessa adored their life together. She had been an active partner in many of his real estate ventures. Warm-hearted, witty, and compassionate, she not only accompanied Frederick to high-stake investor meetings and extravagant galas, but was also the rock that grounded him. She was a pillar of the philanthropic community, heading charity events to help the homeless, raising funds for children's hospitals, and ensuring she used the couple's resources for good. With her presence, Frederick was not just a wealthy man, he was a respected figure who showed up for philanthropic causes across the city. And it was at one such charitable event held at the Waldorf Astoria that everything changed forever. On a crisp winter evening, the Millers arrived at the annual Children's Heart Foundation Gala. The city was in full holiday swing. Lights sparkled along the avenues, elegant wreaths adorned ornate hotel doors, and crisp air carried the perfume of roasted chestnuts from street vendors. The Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom dripped with crystal chandeliers, the floors polished to a mirror-like sheen. A live jazz band played softly in the background, setting the perfect mood for conversation and generosity. Vanessa looked radiant in an emerald gown that complemented her deep brown eyes. Frederick, tall and dark-haired with streaks of silver at the temples, wore a classic tuxedo and charmed everyone with his warm smile. They were the picture of poise and prosperity, drawing polite nods and enthusiastic welcomes from other high-profile guests. The couple circulated the room, greeting acquaintances, discussing real estate prospects with potential investors, and pledging donations to the cause. And that was when Elena Briggs entered Frederick's line of sight. Elena was 27, with striking features and luminous blonde hair that tumbled down her back. She wore a fitted red dress that spoke volumes, brazen, confident, and eye-catching in a room filled with subdued, formal attire. She had volunteered at the check-in table for the event, greeting every donor as they arrived. But her focus that evening was singular. She had her eye on Frederick Miller. Elena approached the couple, introducing herself in a voice as silky as her curves. She gushed about how much Frederick's philanthropy meant to the charity. Vanessa smiled courteously, politely asking questions about Elena's involvement with the organization. Frederick, feeling an immediate jolt of fascination he struggled to rationalize, found himself leaning forward, intrigued by the younger woman's intelligence. She presented herself as well-informed and passionately dedicated to fundraising. That evening, Elena lingered near Frederick. They shared scattered glances across the ballroom. Every time Vanessa turned to speak with an old friend or business associate, Elena miraculously appeared. Whether it was to offer Frederick champagne, to ask him about his latest real estate endeavor, or simply to whisper a sly compliment about how he and Vanessa were such an inspiration, Elena ensured Frederick's attention was never far from her. Vanessa, deeply engaged in conversation with board members, remained blissfully unaware of the intensity brewing in the background. But Frederick felt it. A hush of guilt occasionally pricked him at how intently he engaged with Elena, yet he couldn't tear himself away from this woman who seemed to exist solely to captivate him. When the evening drew to a close, Vanessa excused herself for a moment to speak with the event organizer. Elena and Frederick found themselves side by side. Elena touched Frederick's arm gently and murmured, "Your generosity tonight was extraordinary. We raised more than we expected because of you. If you'd like any follow-up materials or more details on how your donation is being utilized, please let me know. I'd be happy to share coffee sometime." The invitation was soft, but tinged with a flirtatious undertone he couldn't miss. Frederick hesitated only for a moment before taking Elena's business card. He told himself this was purely professional, another contact in the city. No harm in that. "Thank you," he responded politely. "I might take you up on that." Elena smiled, an enigmatic tilt to her lips, and it was a smile that promised more than mere coffee. Thus began a chain of events that would shatter the foundations of Frederick's life, testing the bonds of loyalty, love, and morality. A week after the gala, Frederick found Elena's business card in his jacket pocket. Before he could convince himself of any moral imperative to stay away, he dialed her number under the guise of wanting to learn more about a new charity project. A small meeting, he told himself, something brief and harmless. They met at a quiet coffee shop near Bryant Park, a humble setting for a man of Frederick's stature. Elena arrived wearing a flattering yet conservative outfit, offering a contrast to her gala extravagance. The conversation began innocently enough. The charity's progress, improvements to be made, potential new philanthropic ventures. But the more they spoke, the more Frederick recognized the unmistakable tension between them. Elena was no naive volunteer. She quickly proved she understood real estate trends, dabbled in small personal investments, and thirsted for bigger opportunities. One cappuccino turned into two, and their professional talk wove into personal stories. Elena shared that she grew up in a small town, dreaming of escaping to New York's bright lights. She described her early struggles, working menial jobs, always pushing to gain a foothold in philanthropic circles to meet people of influence. Hours flew, and by the time Frederick walked out of that coffee shop, he felt a bizarre mixture of excitement and dread. A blossoming guilt clung to him as he returned home. Vanessa was her usual warm self, greeting him with a loving smile and a kiss. He pushed any guilty feelings aside, telling himself it was a casual connection. A friend at best, or a colleague in philanthropic circles. That was it. But Elena had lit a spark that refused to be extinguished. A few days later, he invited her to an upcoming real estate seminar where he was a keynote speaker. He rationalized it as giving her an opportunity to expand her knowledge. She arrived, taking a seat in the third row, beaming up at him like a devoted admirer. After the seminar ended, they shared a late dinner. It was during that dinner that the lines between them shifted irrevocably. In a corner booth at an upscale bistro, Elena placed her hand on Frederick's. She spoke in a low voice, sweet as honey, I'm so grateful for your mentorship, Frederick. Not just professionally, you've shown me a world I never knew. Her eyes shone with what looked like genuine admiration. I feel so alive when I'm with you, she added. Frederick's heart thundered in his chest. He could almost see the ring on his finger glinting in accusation, but there was something so enticing, so powerfully magnetic about Elena. She made him feel young and invigorated, like the unstoppable dreamer he had once been. He knew he was on the edge of a slippery slope, yet he still took her hand, giving it a subtle squeeze. What started as a gentle squeeze turned into a clandestine affair in the coming weeks, shrouded in deceit and stolen glances, fueled by adrenaline and the sense of escaping the constraints of his predictable life. Frederick convinced himself that it was harmless as long as no one else knew, and Elena, sensing the power shift in her favor, played the part of his most ardent devotee. She was generous with praise, relentless in her flattery, and seemed to worship every step he took. Still, even as the affair grew, Frederick continued to keep up appearances at home. He remained the attentive husband, engaging in philanthropic events with Vanessa, and showing up to society fundraisers. If Vanessa suspected anything, she gave no indication. She appeared content and proud of their partnership, never dreaming that while she slept, her husband's phone would buzz with late-night messages from another woman. Elena was a skilled manipulator. She recognized that Frederick was not only wealthy, but also possessed a conscience. He felt pangs of guilt for betraying Vanessa, and this guilt made him susceptible, hungry for reassurance that he was still a good man, that perhaps in some twisted reality he deserved a measure of happiness Elena provided. So Elena crafted a narrative. Frederick was underappreciated at home, overshadowed by Vanessa's own philanthropic achievements, relegated to a secondary role even though his brilliance had built their empire. None of this was true. Vanessa was deeply supportive, always proud of Frederick's accomplishments. She never sought to overshadow him, but Elena's words seeped into Frederick's mind like a toxic virus. He began to question whether he was truly satisfied in his marriage or if Vanessa truly understood him. Each lie Elena whispered lodged itself in Frederick's doubts. Over dinner at an upscale Japanese fusion restaurant, Elena half whispered, "I just want to be there for you in ways no one else can. I can see how much pressure you're under. Let me share that burden." She leaned forward, her eyes glimmering with enticement. "I'm the one who truly understands you, Frederick, and I'm not here for your money. I'm here for you." Those words, ironically, resonated in the worst possible way. Frederick had come from a life of struggle. He'd run from gold diggers all his youth. Elena's claim to want only him, not the fortune, stroked his ego. It was a lie he wanted so desperately to believe that he clung to it, ignoring any red flags. But red flags did appear. Subtle at first. Elena's sudden mentions of her financial hardships or her laments that her landlord was raising her rent, though she somehow always appeared in the latest designer outfits. Frederick offered to help in small ways, co-signing a lease, fronting some funds for her short-term investment projects. She looked grateful, overwhelmed, but kept protesting she didn't want to burden him. She played the push and pull expertly, letting Frederick offer more each time. Then she dropped the biggest bombshell of all. Frederick was in his office at the cusp of finalizing a lucrative property deal when his phone started buzzing incessantly. Usually, he set aside personal calls during business meetings, but the repeated vibrations were impossible to ignore. When he glanced at the screen and saw it was Elena, a sense of alarm coursed through him. He stepped into the hallway and answered, tension knotting in his gut. Frederick came Elena's trembling voice, her tone thick with anxiety. We need to talk. It's important." His mind raced. What could possibly be so urgent? "I'm in the middle of a negotiation," he whispered, carefully ensuring his associates couldn't overhear. What's going on? I'm pregnant. Time seemed to stop. His heart pounded in his ears. Pregnant? The word echoed like a gong inside his skull. Are you sure? Yes, she replied between sniffles. I've taken 3 tests, and they're all positive. I don't know what to do. Frederick's mouth went dry. A swirl of emotions overcame him. Fear, guilt, panic, and beneath it all, a fleeting wave of excitement that unsettled him. But any elation was overshadowed by a sinking dread. He was married. How would Vanessa react? How would the world react? Frederick, Elena's quivering voice cut through his cacophony of thoughts. Please, the first so scared. I can't do this alone. The rest of that day rushed by in a haze. He stumbled through his negotiation, barely coherent, though decades of business acumen helped him mask his inner turmoil. The moment he could, he rushed to Elena's apartment. She met him at the door, tears streaking her cheeks, showing him the positive home pregnancy tests. She insisted she had an appointment with a doctor in a week to confirm everything. But her eyes glistened with a mixture of terror and hope, like she was clinging to him for dear life. We'll figure this out, Frederick said, wrapping her in a hug. His voice sounded foreign in his own ears. He felt as though he was standing outside himself, watching a man he no longer recognized. I'll be there for you. The next several days were an emotional blur for Frederick. At home, Vanessa asked if he was feeling unwell. He was distant, anxious, consumed by something unspoken. He mumbled excuses about work pressure. She offered her unwavering support, massaging his shoulders and telling him how proud she was of his upcoming project. Meanwhile, in stolen moments, he pressed Elena about possible options. Did she want to keep the baby? If she did, then what? Elena insisted she wanted the child. She assured Frederick that, despite her own fears, she believed he would be an incredible father. He felt torn to pieces. He imagined his life with a new baby who shared his blood but not his marital vows, and the devastation it would bring to Vanessa. 1,000 different nightmare scenarios played out in his mind. But Elena had him cornered. Every time he wavered, she reminded him that her finances were meager. She would have no choice but to turn to public resources, or perhaps even reveal everything to the media if he tried to abandon her. Frederick was too intelligent to miss the undertones of subtle blackmail, yet he found himself paralyzed, too riddled with shame to fight back. Vanessa noticed the change in Frederick's demeanor long before she uncovered the truth. A woman who had built her life with him through thick and thin, from near bankruptcy to abundant success, does not simply miss the signs of distress in her partner. His late-night returns became more frequent, his phone calls more secretive. He had always been open, leaving his phone on the kitchen counter or living room table. Now, he guarded it, turning the screen away or silencing calls at odd hours. Initially, Vanessa attributed it to the high-stress business expansion Frederick was spearheading. But after a particularly cold interaction, where Frederick snapped at her over a trivial matter, she recognized the distinct tang of betrayal in the air. Deep in her gut, a primal fear took root: infidelity. Instead of confronting him immediately, she waited, biding her time. Vanessa had always been methodical, even-keeled, never one to jump to conclusions without evidence. She began observing patterns: the phone calls from unknown number, the barely concealed text messages he would receive late in the evening, the occasional slip of his tongue about meeting a colleague who never made it onto his schedule. While rummaging through some files, she found a strange receipt for an expensive dinner for 2 at a restaurant she had never visited with him. Slowly, doubt and suspicion metamorphosed into certainty. Her beloved husband was seeing someone else. Vanessa cried in private, tears stinging her eyes as she pictured Frederick with another woman. She felt humiliated, enraged, heartbroken. But she was not a woman to break easily. She decided she needed proof. She considered hiring a private investigator, an extraordinary measure that once would have felt unthinkable. But her heartbreak and the ever-growing suspicion overshadowed any moral reservations. If Frederick was truly betraying her, she needed the truth in black and white. She discreetly contacted an investigative firm recommended by a friend in the philanthropic circuit. They specialized in high-profile marital disputes, ensuring confidentiality. Within days, the detective assigned to her case began trailing Frederick, and it did not take long for them to spot him meeting a slender blonde woman in a quiet, upscale bar. A camera caught them in various stages of embrace, confirming Vanessa's worst fears. When Vanessa reviewed the photos and read the detective's detailed report, heartbreak and fury warred within her. Her first instinct was to confront Frederick, to scream, cry, and demand an explanation. But the detective's parting words haunted her. "Something about this woman is off, Miss S. Miller. She seems too practiced. My guess is she's not in this for love." Vanessa's logical mind took hold. She decided to wait, to dig deeper. She wanted the full scope of this woman's motives. She collected more information: Elena's name, background, her previous employment, even some rumored relationships. And a disturbing pattern emerged. Elena had a history of seeking out affluent men, forging short-lived relationships that often ended with threats or hush money. Sick to her core, Vanessa recognized that her husband had fallen for a cunning manipulator, just as the detective had suggested. Yet, there was one piece of intel she didn't see coming: the rumor that Elena was claiming to be pregnant. Heart-pounding, Vanessa tried to confirm. The detective couldn't procure an official medical record, but there were whispers among Elena's acquaintances that she had boasted about snagging a golden ticket by hooking a millionaire and faking a pregnancy scare. Vanessa's vision blurred with tears as she absorbed this possibility. How far had Frederick gone with this affair? And was he aware of Elena's alleged scheme? The more Vanessa mulled it over, the more determined she became. She would protect her marriage, her dignity, and Frederick from the claws of this con artist, if it wasn't already too late. Elena recognized that, despite the power she seemed to wield by claiming she was pregnant, her position was precarious. She understood that Frederick's guilt would either keep him by her side or drive him to desperation. To maintain her hold on him, she had to be relentless, carefully orchestrating every conversation, every plea for help. It wasn't merely about the money, though her extravagant lifestyle depended heavily on Frederick's secret payments. It was also about validation and revenge against a world that had never afforded her the comforts she believed she deserved. Late one afternoon, Elena waited anxiously in the tastefully decorated apartment that Frederick had leased in her name, a place she had insisted upon, citing the stress of pregnancy and her need for a calmer environment. The apartment itself was proof of Frederick's growing entanglement: plush furniture, expensive artwork, and even a well-stocked refrigerator filled with imported groceries. She had convinced him it would be best for the baby if she could live somewhere peaceful, away from the noise and clutter of her previous residence. Frederick had agreed, transferring yet more funds to cover rent and upkeep. Each day, Elena found new ways to ensure he never forgot his so-called obligations. If she sensed Frederick pulling away or hesitating, she would launch into stories of morning sickness, dizzy spells, or sudden bouts of fatigue. She called at odd hours, sometimes in tears, to report imagined emergencies like mild spotting or phantom cramps. When he arrived, anxious and breathless, she would calm him, whispering that his presence was all she needed to feel safe again. Thus, she transformed his guilt into a sense of paternal duty, tying him to her whims. Frederick, for his part, was trapped in a relentless cycle of dread. Every time his phone buzzed with an incoming text or call, his heart lurched. It could be Elena asking for another injection of cash or leveling subtle threats. Or it could be Vanessa, his wife, wondering about his whereabouts. At night, he tossed and turned, torn between keeping Elena placated and maintaining the facade of a devoted husband at home. His once firm moral compass felt hopelessly adrift, battered by shame and fear. He found himself simultaneously resenting and pitying Elena, resenting her manipulations, pitying her for whatever emptiness drove her to spin such a twisted scheme. One evening, he arrived at the apartment straight from a tense board meeting. Elena greeted him in a silky robe, her blonde hair arranged in a deliberately messy style that suggested both vulnerability and seduction. The lights in the living room were dimmed, casting a gentle glow over the space. A sense of unease rippled through Frederick as he stepped inside, aware of how easily he could lose control of the situation. Elena cast him a small, tremulous smile. "I've been waiting," she murmured, her hand fluttering to her abdomen as though cradling a precious secret. "You never texted me back about the ultrasound appointment. Don't you care about our baby's health?" Frederick's stomach twisted. He had been avoiding the topic, quietly hoping he could put it off until he found a better strategy, until he discovered how to confront the truth he was beginning to suspect, that something about this pregnancy felt off. Yet whenever he doubted her, he reminded himself of his own culpability. He had slept with her, encouraged her affections. Could he blame her for wanting security? "Elena," he began, voice tight, "I'm not trying to avoid you, but you have to understand, I can't just walk away from Vanessa, from my commitments. People talk. If I vanish every evening or show up to medical appointments out of the blue, she'll become suspicious." He sighed, forcing himself to maintain calm. "I need more time." Elena's eyes narrowed, the flicker of bitterness behind them impossible to miss. "Time?" she echoed, pressing her palm against the curve of her belly. "A baby doesn't wait for you to be ready, Frederick. You either step up or—" She paused, and her expression turned icy. "Or I'll have to find someone else who can help me through this. I might even have to go public." His eyes widened at that last statement. She knew precisely how to wield the threat of scandal. Even if she did not drop his name directly, gossip could spread like wildfire in circles where Frederick was well known. The tarnish on his reputation might cost him not just his marriage, but also business partnerships and professional credibility. A wave of anger surged in his chest, but it was immediately displaced by raw panic. "Don't do that," he muttered, tension thrumming through his body. "I'll handle it, okay? I'll make sure you have everything you need. Let's not talk about going public or dragging anyone else into this." Elena's features softened into a triumphant pout, as though she were the vulnerable victim. She slipped her hand into his, gently tugging him toward the couch. "I'm not trying to threaten you, Frederick," she cooed. "I just don't want to be left alone in this. It's your baby, too." Swallowing hard, he let her guide him, sinking into the plush cushions. Her perfume enveloped him, heady and sweet, and he felt the undeniable weight of her expectation. He remembered Vanessa waiting at home, Vanessa, who had once given up her own career ambitions to support his real estate ventures, the woman who believed in him even when no one else did. He pictured her face, radiant with devotion, never suspecting how badly he had broken their vows. "Trust me," Elena said softly, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "I'm the only one who understands what you're going through. Vanessa doesn't know the pressure you're under. She's never seen your vulnerability like I have. Let me be here for you." Frederick stared at her, flooded with a profound sense of revulsion at what he was doing, and at the same time overcome by a paralyzing fear of losing everything if he dared to cut her off. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably another message from home, but he ignored it, torn between the life he had built and the tangled mess he had created. And so Elena's hold on Frederick deepened. Every doubt he voiced, every attempt he made to disentangle himself, was met with renewed pleas, reminders, or outright threats. She took pains to appear as a fragile mother to be in need of saving, even as she subtly tightened the financial and emotional rope around his neck. As the weeks crept by, Frederick's guilt-driven compliance only fueled Elena's confidence that her scheme was working and that, should he ever waver, she still had one final, devastating trump card, the public fallout he dreaded above all else. Vanessa, armed with her detective's report, decided one night that she'd had enough. She had spent weeks managing the pain, letting Frederick think she was unaware, gathering more evidence, formulating a plan. But when he came home late again, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, a quiet wrath took over. She confronted him in the kitchen. "Frederick," she said softly, placing her hands on the marble countertop as though for support. "Who is Elena Briggs?" Frederick froze. For a split second he considered lying, feigning ignorance. But the stoic resolve in Vanessa's eyes told him that she already knew. He swallowed hard, his heart hammering in his chest. He began, but words evaded him. Vanessa pressed forward, tears glistening in her eyes. "She's the woman you've been seeing, isn't she?" Her voice trembled with a mix of fury and heartbreak. "The one you're paying, the one you're hiding carrying your child?" His eyes snapped to hers, a wave of nausea flipping his stomach. How do you know?" Vanessa's breath caught. So it was all true. Her heartbreak momentarily overwhelmed her. Anger, betrayal, agony, they all roiled together. She closed her eyes, steadying herself, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I hired a private investigator," she said bluntly. "I know more than you think." Frederick stared at her, shame constricting his throat. He tried to reach out, but she recoiled. "Please, let me explain," he pleaded, voice ragged. "It just happened. I never meant to—" "You never meant to?" she echoed, her tears giving way to a burning resentment. "You slept with this woman, spent our money on her, and now she claims to be having your baby. So don't tell me it just happened." He bowed his head, remorse searing him from the inside. "I was weak," he managed. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness." For a long, painful moment, they stood in silence. Finally, Vanessa asked, "Is she really pregnant?" "Yes," he rasped, though an odd feeling of uncertainty clouded his mind. Elena had never shown him a legitimate doctor's report, only the tests she'd done at home, and a vague mention of an upcoming appointment. "She says she is." Vanessa inhaled sharply. "Have you been to any doctor's appointment with her?" A flicker of confusion darted across Frederick's features. "Not yet, but I'm planning on going." Vanessa nodded once, resolute. "We're going together. I want to see the medical confirmation with my own eyes." He opened his mouth to argue, but the implacable fire in Vanessa's gaze silenced him. Though he was terrified of Elena's reaction, he found a strange sense of relief. Maybe this was for the best, a chance to confirm the truth. Elena was startled when Frederick informed her that he and Vanessa would be joining for her upcoming prenatal appointment. She stammered excuses, saying the clinic was small, the timing inconvenient. But Frederick, emboldened by Vanessa's steadfast presence, insisted Elena had no choice but to relent, though not without an undercurrent of panic vibrating through her voice. The day arrived under a grey sky. The three of them stood awkwardly in the clinic's modest waiting room. Elena clung to Frederick's arm, trying to display ownership. Vanessa stood a little apart, quiet, her jaw set. Other pregnant women sat flipping through magazines, some with supportive partners, some alone. The tension between the trio was palpable. When Elena's name was called, she led them to an examination room. The doctor, a pleasant woman in her mid-50s, frowned slightly at the unusual gathering, but proceeded with professional courtesy. She asked Elena routine questions about her symptoms, her medical history, her last menstrual period. Meanwhile, Vanessa observed every twitch, every hesitation. Then came the moment of truth. An ultrasound. The doctor prepared Elena, applying the cool gel to her abdomen. Frederick felt his heart pounding like a thunderous drum. If Elena was indeed pregnant, this image would seal their fates. If she was lying, the doctor slid the transducer across Elena's abdomen, eyes scanning the monitor carefully. A tense silence filled the room. Seconds stretched like hours. Frederick's breath caught in his throat. Vanessa clenched her fists, bracing for heartbreak. Elena's eyes darted nervously to the monitor. Finally, the doctor's measured, professional voice broke the quiet. "Elena, are you certain about the timing you gave me?" Elena swallowed, nodding. "Yes, of course." The doctor angled the monitor so that Elena, Frederick, and Vanessa could see. The screen showed the grainy image of an empty uterus, no fetal sac, no heartbeat, nothing. "I'm not seeing any sign of a pregnancy," the doctor said gently. "We should run some blood tests, but based on the ultrasound, you are most likely not pregnant at this time." Elena flushed, her face turning ghostly pale before brightening with defensiveness. "This machine must be faulty," she snapped. "I took multiple tests at home. They were positive." The doctor didn't budge. "False positives can happen, but they're rare. Let me run a blood test to confirm. It's the most accurate way." With that, Elena had no escape. She sat upright, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. She glanced at Frederick for help, but he stared back, the devastation and anger forming a storm in his gaze. Vanessa's voice sliced through the tension. "We'll do the blood test," she said firmly. No more excuses. Later that afternoon, they convened in the doctor's small office to review the blood test results. The tension was as thick as smoke. The doctor folded her hands on the desk, addressing Elena carefully. "Your HCG levels are not elevated. There is no evidence of pregnancy." The verdict was absolute. Elena opened her mouth, then closed it, her complexion ashen. Frederick was livid. He stood, jaw tense, fists clenched at his sides. Vanessa's expression was unreadable, but her voice trembled with barely contained outrage when she spoke. "You lied," she whispered. "How could you do this?" Elena reached for Frederick's arm, desperately. "Frederick, I don't understand. The home tests were positive. Maybe it was a chemical pregnancy, or I lost it somehow. You have to believe me." She dissolved into a flood of tears. Frederick recoiled. For the first time, he saw her tears for what they were: manipulation. He felt fury clawing at his insides, but also a staggering sense of relief. "Stop lying," he growled. "You never showed me a doctor's report. You never let me be there for any earlier appointments. All this time, you just took my money, told me you couldn't work, that you needed a new place to live, and it was all based on a lie." Elena's tears took on a shrill pitch. "But I love you. I only did it because I was afraid of losing you, of losing the security." "Security," Vanessa cut in icily. "There it is. You wanted money and status. You almost tore our lives apart for greed." Elena trembled, glaring at Vanessa. In that moment, the gentleness she'd tried to show Frederick gave way to seething resentment. She knew she had lost. She attempted a final card. "Frederick, are you really going to believe her over me? After all we've shared?" Frederick inhaled sharply, decades of moral conflict swirling through his mind. He turned to Vanessa, whose pain was evident in her teary eyes. Despite everything, she had come here for him, to reveal the truth. He looked back at Elena, seeing clearly for the first time the manipulative web of deceit. "I was a fool to believe you," he said quietly. "Don't ever contact me again." Elena's face contorted with rage and desperation. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she let out a strangled sob and fled from the office, leaving a suffocating silence in her wake. Frederick found Vanessa in the hallway after Elena's dramatic exit, leaning against the wall, face buried in her hands. Guilt surged through him. He gently touched her shoulder. She stiffened but didn't jerk away. Slowly, she raised her head, revealing eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Vanessa, I've betrayed you in the worst way." She regarded him for a few moments. He was prepared for her to yell, to slap him, to walk out of his life forever. Instead, she drew a shaky breath. "I can't pretend this will be easy to forgive," she said, her voice taut with hurt. "But I also can't turn away without giving us a chance to fix things. We've been through so much together. I just need time." Frederick nodded, tears burning behind his eyes. "Anything. I'll do anything to make this right." They left the clinic side by side. No comforting arms looped around each other, no easy conversation. Just two people who once promised to love and honor each other, now navigating the wreckage of betrayal. After Elena stormed out of the clinic, she went on a rampage of phone calls, texting Frederick relentlessly. At first, she threatened to go to the press with her story, to tarnish his reputation and drag his name through the mud. Frederick, swamped with guilt and anger, ignored her messages. He was busy grappling with the fallout at home, trying to salvage any vestiges of trust with Vanessa. When her threats yielded no response, Elena changed tactics. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she'd done everything out of love and fear. She told him that she'd planned to get pregnant for real, that she wanted to be the mother of his child. Frederick recognized the manipulative pattern, but part of him still felt pity. He remained silent. The messages continued, bouncing between fury and apology. Desperation fueled Elena's next steps. She tried to barge into Frederick's office building one afternoon, only to be escorted out by security. She confronted him in the parking garage, her voice cracking as she pleaded for a second chance. He refused, turning away coldly, leaving her alone in the echoing space. The final blow to Elena's scheme came when she realized her carefully constructed life was crumbling. The rent on the new apartment, no longer funded by Frederick, became too much for her to bear. Her credit cards, maxed out in pursuit of designer wardrobes and lavish dinners, caught up with her. When she couldn't keep up with payments, she faced eviction. She tried reaching out to old flames, men she'd manipulated before, but word of her deception had spread. She'd burned too many bridges. One night, she packed a suitcase and checked into a cheap motel, her funds dwindling rapidly. From a luxury apartment near Manhattan's elite to a cramped, musty room smelling of cigarette smoke, Elena felt the sting of karma's swift backhand. She had no allies left, no sugar daddies to bail her out. She was alone, bitter and broke. Frederick and Vanessa remained in a state of fragile coexistence. They continued living in the penthouse, but the emotional distance between them was profound. Frederick insisted on attending marriage counseling. Vanessa hesitated, her pride was wounded, her trust shattered. Yet, a love forged over decades can be stubborn, refusing to vanish under the weight of a single betrayal. She agreed, hoping to find closure, clarity, or at least a path to healing. In those counseling sessions, Frederick confessed the emptiness and restlessness that had led him astray. Vanessa revealed how discarded she felt, especially after devoting her life to supporting him. They revisited the early days of their marriage, the laughter, the late nights planning for their future, the storms they'd weathered together. They recalled how each challenge had brought them closer. This time, though, the challenge had come from within. Frederick knew redemption would not come easily. He cut ties with Elena unequivocally, blocking her number and ceasing all communication. He wanted to prove to Vanessa that she was his priority. He apologized daily, not just with words but through actions, surprising her with home-cooked meals, planning thoughtful outings, and being fully present. He cleared his schedule for therapy appointments. Slowly, bit by bit, he tried to show her that he was willing to do the hard work to earn back her trust. Vanessa, for her part, wrestled with conflicting emotions, her love for Frederick and her heartbreak at his betrayal. Some days, the pain and bitterness rose like a tidal wave, and she wanted to lock him out of her life. Other days, she remembered the depth of their partnership, how they had lifted each other during times of despair. She clung to the hope that they could come out stronger on the other side. It was not a linear journey. Setbacks happened, a careless reminder of Elena, a news article referencing the real estate scandal around a suspicious mistress. Each time, it ripped open the wound, but they learned to lean on each other, to share their fears and regrets openly. Without honesty, there was no path forward. Some months after the scandal, Frederick discovered that Elena had attempted to approach certain tabloids with her story, but her credibility was ruined. The tabloids sniffed out that the pregnancy story was a hoax. No respectable news outlet was willing to tarnish their reputation by publishing a piece from a known scam artist. Frederick's legal team, already prepared, had threatened defamation lawsuits if any false claims were printed. Faced with potential legal battles and financial ruin, Elena was forced to retreat into obscurity. Eventually, the private investigator Vanessa once hired furnished them with updates. Elena had been evicted from the apartment Frederick paid for, sank into credit card debt, and was couch surfing among former friends in Queens. Even those friends, it seemed, were running out of patience. Gossip circled that she'd tried to trick another wealthy man in a bar, only to be laughed out of the place when someone recognized her from the fiasco with Frederick. Karma had arrived with brutal efficiency, leaving Elena in the same desperate state she had been before meeting Frederick, if not worse. She had built a castle of lies and watched it collapse. Meanwhile, Frederick and Vanessa had the chance to rebuild, stronger if they chose to persevere. 6 months after the confrontation at the clinic, Frederick arranged a surprise renewal of vows. He had spent those months proving that he could be the husband Vanessa deserved. He took her on weekend retreats away from the city. They devoted more time to philanthropic causes together, and he made certain her voice was heard in every major life decision moving forward. Vanessa was hesitant at first when he proposed the vow renewal, uncertain if it was merely a grand gesture. But his consistent sincerity reassured her. He wanted to reaffirm their commitment in the presence of close friends and family, to symbolically bury the memory of deceit and begin anew. On a warm summer evening, in the gardens of a close friend's estate in the Hamptons, they stood facing each other amidst twinkling fairy lights. Vanessa wore an ivory sheath dress, understated yet elegant. Frederick donned a tailored suit, looking both nervous and hopeful. A small crowd gathered, only those who mattered, people who had supported them through the ordeal. Tears glimmered in Vanessa's eyes as Frederick slipped a new ring onto her finger, representing a fresh start. They spoke heartfelt vows, acknowledging their struggles, promising honesty, respect, and loyalty. Vanessa's voice broke when she said, "I choose us, Frederick, not because it's easy, but because we have something worth fighting for." Frederick's throat tightened as he responded, "I will spend every day of my life proving myself worthy of your love." Their vows concluded to gentle applause. Though heartbreak had scarred them, the couple stepped forward into the next chapter of their marriage. It would not be perfect. No real marriage is. But the foundation they now built was rooted in honesty forged through the crucible of betrayal and forgiveness. A few weeks after the vow renewal, when Frederick thought life had finally settled, he received an unexpected call. The number was blocked, but he answered out of habit, only to hear the trembling voice of Elena Briggs. He froze, mouth dry. "What do you want, Elena?" She let out a shaky breath. I'm in trouble, Frederick. Money trouble. I'm about to be on the streets. No one else will help me. Frederick's heart pounded with anger. What makes you think I will? She whimpered. Because we had something. Even if you hate me now, I'm desperate. I'll do anything you ask. Just please help me. I'm begging you. He closed his eyes, recalling how he once felt pity for her. But that pity had nearly cost him his marriage, his integrity, and his peace of mind. He remembered the heartbreak she inflicted, the lies, the manipulations, the blackmail. The memory stung, but so did a flicker of compassion. Yet he couldn't ignore what she had done to Vanessa, to them. Resolute, he hardened his tone. Elena, you destroyed your own life with your lies. You used me, threatened my family. I owe you nothing. He paused, letting the silence weigh heavy. Don't ever contact me again. He hung up, breathing unevenly, the final chapter of that toxic liaison sealed. She tried calling back multiple times, but he blocked the number, determined to preserve the sanctity of the life. He was rebuilding with Vanessa. It was an echo of the consequences Elena brought upon herself. Her manipulative web had finally strangled her. Time passed, and with each day, Frederick and Vanessa found a steadier rhythm. They learned to communicate more openly, to express frustrations before they festered, to celebrate each other's successes wholeheartedly. Therapy sessions became less frequent, transitioning from crisis management to building a healthier dynamic. Though the memories of the affair haunted them, they managed to transform the pain into lessons. They realized they'd allowed their once vibrant connection to slip into complacency. Frederick recognized his vulnerability to outside praise when he felt undervalued in his marriage, a problem he could have avoided by communicating his feelings. Vanessa acknowledged she sometimes gave so much to philanthropic causes that she forgot to nurture the personal bond with her husband. Their shared accountability sparked a renewal of closeness they hadn't felt in years. Professionally, Frederick's real estate empire continued to flourish. He handled his affairs with renewed integrity, determined never to let personal failings bleed into business decisions again. Vanessa expanded her philanthropic efforts, often collaborating with Frederick to ensure their giving was aligned and purposeful. They became a beloved power couple in New York once more, radiating a renewed unity that society watchers noticed and admired. Meanwhile, Elena's fate remained uncertain, but occasional rumors hinted at her continued struggles. She bounced from one short-lived arrangement to another, never regaining the stability she craved. It was the ultimate lesson in how deceit can devour a life, leaving nothing but regret. The Millers, however, refused to let that dark chapter define them. Their marriage was not perfect, no union ever is, but it became stronger in the broken places. Like a bone that heals and becomes more resilient at the fracture site. They moved forward together, hand in hand, living proof that love can endure when nurtured with honesty, respect, and forgiveness. Betrayal, heartbreak, and manipulation tore Frederick and Vanessa Miller's world apart. Yet through resilience, honesty, and forgiveness, they seized a second chance at building something even stronger. Their story reminds us that no marriage, no matter how solid, can withstand secrecy, and no deception can hide forever from the light of truth. Elena Briggs's grand scheme collapsed under the weight of her lies, serving as a stark warning of how greed and manipulation often backfire in the most devastating ways. In the end, love prevailed for those who chose transparency over illusion. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey of twists, turns, and lessons learned. If you found value in this dramatic tale, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating stories that inspire and caution, reminding us all to treasure what truly matters in life. Stay tuned for more riveting drama and life lessons